Cup, brought to you by the Nickel Plate. Sit, sip, savor, and shop.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on the start of your Wednesday morning. Thanks so much for being with us for Second Cup. We're starting off with just me this morning, but Katie will join us in just a couple of seconds. She's doing an interview and requested that we start without her. And what Katie does, what Katie asks for, what Katie wants, we all do. Glad you're with us to start the day. A couple of things we want to talk about this morning. Number one, safety in schools. It's become a big issue, especially with these growing threats all around Western New York and frankly across the country with these kids who are sharing posts on social media, and then the schools have to respond, and so does law enforcement. So I would love to hear your thoughts this morning, your voice about what needs to be done, how we move forward, and what the responsibility is for parents in this situation. And if you are a parent, do you take responsibility for any of this? Or maybe less responsible, or responsibility rather, but do you take any steps, or do you take some sort of precaution within your own family to say, hey, you know what, stop sharing this on social media, or I'm going to take a look at your social media to see what exactly it is that you're talking about. I'm really interested because there's one Florida sheriff who is basically saying parents are going to be put on blast along with their kid who makes a threat and would ultimately be put on blast in front of the public, walked out in a perp walk for all to see, especially in this one case in particular, where the sheriff in this one county says that this one kid had an entire stockpile, an arsenal of weapons, and is then arrested. And you see him here, walked out of the police car and treated as if he was a common criminal. This is a juvenile. This is a minor. What do you make of that? And is this something that could work to deter this kind of threat from happening across the country and on a local level here in Western New York? Because we see it happening. We've seen the posts being shared, and we've heard of these kids now being charged with making a threat of mass harm. It's happening in Niagara County. What do you make of that? Then I also want to update you on some breaking news that we're following this morning. Two big stories on what is a really massive news morning for us here in Western New York. First and foremost, I want to take you to Pooley Place on Buffalo's west side. I want to show you this fire that absolutely destroyed a house about 4:30 this morning. That's when it all started. And still this morning, firefighters are on the scene, albeit cleaning up. But this is what it looked like when our photographer got there about 15 minutes after that fire started. Massive flames coming from the house. Firefighters on the outside fighting this to make sure that the fire is contained to this one house in particular. The house here on Pooley is destroyed. The flames so hot, so dangerous. They burned off the siding on the house next door. And we know on these west side homes, they're very, very close together. So, they've got a matter of feet to work with here. And then the heat of the fire also affected homes across the street, which is so unbelievable to see. The question is, how did this fire start? And our photographer asked the question, did somebody set this fire intentionally? Was this arson? The fire chief says, we are looking into that. It's part of the investigation, albeit too early to tell. Though at this point, we do know that there are a number of people who are being helped by the Red Cross this morning, at least 6 people being helped who are inside that home. None of them were hurt, but we are also learning that 2 firefighters have been hurt. One suffered an injury on his wrist, the other one suffering an injury on his leg. Yeah, Julie says, what a huge fire. That's so scary. And Elizabeth says, the scariest part is that so many houses in Buffalo are built so close together, and that's the whole thing and why they spread so quickly. So firefighters have to get their act fast to make sure that they are mitigating the potential spread of that fire, because if there are people next door, you don't want that house to be affected. And of course, property, loss of life, 2 big things that firefighters are really tasked with limiting, right? The cost of property damage and the loss of life. I know. Della says, oh my gosh, prayers to the survivors. Connie just saying, wow. So you were watching this unfold with us all morning long if you were watching on TV. And of course, we also brought it to you during our Facebook segment at 5:15. Linda says, God bless the firefighters and prayers to the families. And Connie says, lots of those older homes have a ton of wood in them. Right. These are all wood frame houses in Buffalo, right? So that's even more, what would you call it? I don't know. It's fuel to the fire, basically, for lack of a better term. Linda says, God bless the firefighters and prayers to all the families. Yeah, so 6 people at least forced out of the home, now being helped by the Red Cross. And Julie says, Katie must really worry about her husband when he has a job like that. Yeah, I mean, these guys are doing what people don't ordinarily do. They run into burning buildings when we all run out. So you got to imagine that, you hear about a firefighter, Arno, for instance, who, God bless his soul, unfortunately died in a fire, right? You never want that to happen, but that is a risk of this job, and they know that going in, and they are heroes for doing just that. Charlene says, may they all just be safe, and good morning to you, Kenneth. Yeah, sad story. Hopefully everyone is okay in that, and we hope for all the firefighters, those 2 firefighters who are working this one. Sarah says, house fires are one of my worst fears. And Lori says, people don't realize what firefighters do on a regular basis. It's a hard job. It's taxing, too. Right? Like they're exhausted. They work these 24-hour shifts, and there is just simple exhaustion that kicks in right after. Somebody said that they were tuning in late. Marguerite, good morning to you. Katie is doing an interview right now. I think it's by Zoom too. So she should be with us in just a little while. And as I mentioned, what Katie wants is that we start without her, and what Katie wants, Katie gets. Linda says, when you see a first responder, firefighters, police, etc., just tell them to stay safe. It means a lot to them. And Monica says, not enough appreciation for them until you need them. No doubt. Hi, Brittany. Good morning. Katie will be with us in just a minute. Don't worry. And then Caitlin says, been through too many house fires, unfortunately. Yeah, I know. And this one, a little bit different than the others when we see that house just crumble in front of us. We were literally watching it in real time along with you. Caitlin says, my mom's been through like 6. I've been through 3. Dear Lord. Unbelievable. And look at this fire. I mean, when you get there and you see these flames like this, you realize the magnitude of how dangerous and how bad this fire actually was. So we'll stay on top of this one for you, and we'll bring you updates as we get them. Then we are also following some breaking news in the town of Linden in Cattaraugus County. Sheriff's deputies there are searching for an armed suspect, is what they're telling us, an armed person, after some sort of domestic situation down there. So they're asking people in the area of Robb Road to stay in place, shelter in place, not leave their houses, and that's within a mile radius of Robb Road. When we spoke with dispatchers from the Cattaraugus County Sheriff's Office, they just gave us those basic details, so we really don't have any more information beyond that. But again, if you live in the area of Robb Road in Lindenville, you're being told to shelter in place until further notice, and certainly as we get more information about that one, we will keep you posted as well. Okay. Let's talk about the big stories, because I've basically just chatted for 8 minutes, and I want to make sure that we're getting to your voice as well. So we want to talk about the idea of all of these school threats that we've seen within the first few weeks of school. We've seen it in Batavia, the town of Clarence, and against Newfane and Lockport schools. So where do we go from here as a community, and how do we make sure we are cracking down on these kinds of threats that are happening? And as a parent, is it incumbent upon you to say, show me your social media, show me your phone, show me your text messages, and let's stop this from happening? So Kathy says any kind of threat should be taken seriously, no matter what it is. I agree with you 100%. And we basically saw that happen at Niagara Wheatfield this past week, where there was that technological problem where a lockdown was called, police respond, but there was no threat, according to the Niagara County Sheriff's Office. No threat whatsoever. Yet here we are. I mean, they get the alarm that there's some sort of a lockdown call, despite the issue with their technology. They have to respond. And they respond in a way that they normally would, the tactical gear and everything along those lines, to make sure that your kids are safe. Scary, but perhaps necessary. Jeff Baker says, well, unfortunately, kids have been taught that parental discipline is child abuse. So Jeff, I wonder, maybe double down on that. Give us some more information on why you say that. What your thought is here. Larry says, once again, I'd like to say, parents, you are the first teacher of your kids. Let that sink in, he says. Caitlin says, this is such a scary world to raise kids in. And then Peter says, I wonder if social media didn't exist, if these threats would happen. Also remember, Kenneth says to pull over for flashing blue lights. When you're talking about volunteer firefighters, no doubt, absolutely. Marguerite says, I wonder how no threat is determined. So there's a couple of different ways, right? They search the school. They kind of, I assume, have to go to the place where the lockdown was called to say, okay, what's going on here? But if they don't see anything and they aren't, when they're sweeping the school, as what they would say, and there's no threat, or, perhaps there's no online threat that's credible, they have to go around and check all these boxes to make sure that there's no threat. Mark says, some kids have no respect for adults. They think they could get away with it. Grace says, what do parents think? This is crazy. I'm quite sure, Larry says, that this would not happen as much if social media wasn't around. Diamond says, under 18, you should be checking nightly. Whether you trust them or not, we are always responsible for their actions and opinions. You lay the foundation for how they go on in this world. Now, the craziest thing about this is that there's also a warning coming out this morning from the Erie County Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. This is a big deal. Apparently, there's a post being shared all around on Facebook that tells people how to build a bomb out of a water bottle. It's basically giving you the ingredients, and all of this is being shared. And what they're saying is this is a big problem. This is the post that they shared, but they blurred out the ingredients here. And so what they're saying is, don't share these posts. Don't give these posts any more air than they're already getting, because that's what's causing the problem. And this post is kind of disgusting when you're saying kids, let me read it to you. Kids are putting whatever it is in plastic drink bottles and capping it, leaving it on lawns and mailboxes and gardens on driveways, just waiting for you to pick it up, intending to put it in the rubbish, but you'll never make it. If the bottle is picked up and the bottle is shaken even just a little, in about 30 seconds or less, it builds up enough gas and explodes with enough force to remove your extremities. The liquid is boiling hot. Don't pick up any plastic bottles. Like, this is the post that's being shared. Is this not alarming? Super scary to see this stuff. But again, they're saying don't share this. And if you see this, to call police.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Welcome back.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Happy Wednesday.
Thank you for joining. I just talked for 12 minutes.
Oh, my gosh. So did I, though. I was out doing something else. It's one of these days. We're having one of those mornings here. You talked about the fire already.
Yes.
Crazy. That's crazy.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah. And I hate the like you want to let people know, but you also don't want to give it attention.
Right.
That's the fine line that we walk, right?
But I also think, so Anita says, actually making a threat is a threat. That's a great point. And they're being charged as a result of making a terroristic threat.
Did you talk about the guy in Florida?
Yes.
The sheriff in Florida? Okay, what did people think about that?
I think a lot of people agree that it's necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll show that video again. The kid who allegedly had this arsenal.
Right.
And then is walked out for all to see in public.
Yeah. And can I just say, if this is true, that is terrifying.
Right?
Like, why does a kid have that?
Great question.
Have a book. Have a video game.
Well, and maybe that's the problem here also.
And also, I'm sorry, mom and dad have to know.
Right.
They've got to, and I feel like that's what I heard you saying as I was walking in, you've got to stay on top of this stuff.
Christina, good morning. It's shocking and too easy for young kids to get attentions. Jason says kids should not have weapons. But what do you think about this kid being walked out for everyone to see? This is what the sheriff in Florida says he's doing now to cut down on these kinds of threats.
So, and Elizabeth has a good point. A child's not going to have that kind of arsenal without their parents knowing, right? So, okay, parents, we have to wrap our minds around this. Even if your kid says they're interested in X, Y, and Z, guess what? That's not an interest until, I don't know. Well, is it even an interest when you're an adult? I don't know.
I struggle with this because we have a Second Amendment right to bear arms in this country.
As adults.
Sure. And this is kind of where I'm going.
Right.
So at what point do we say,
No.
our children maybe are hunting? And I agree,
Sure.
like that is a fine thing for a child to be doing if you're with an adult who's trained and educated.
Yeah.
But
Very popular in New York State.
why are we buying children their own guns?
Right.
Why, we saw this just recently.
Mine is for reasons like that. Like, and I do, like, I know a lot of hunters, and my first reporting jobs up in the North Country, everybody hunted.
Right.
And it was like a family thing. And it is what it is. Like, you do it for a reason. You know what I mean? Like, you're learning respectfully how to handle these different things, and you're using them for the reason they're intended.
Right. But even still, I mean, buying a hunting weapon for a child, I feel like is unnecessary.
Define child. You know what I mean? Like, because
this kid looked like he was 12.
And a lot of these kids, they do that. They do hunt with these hunting weapons when they're 12. And like some of the schools have shooting teams, like if you get to like the rural areas. But this is part of their culture. If you're using them for the right reasons and you're trained and you're going through all those courses, because like nobody's just, you shouldn't be just handing these kind of things to kids. Like that is one thing. But like this obviously was not the intended purpose.
So Diamond has an interesting comment. Regardless of where you're being raised, there is a space in this world for all of us. And these children are being raised with hate and judgmental tendency. Then they're convinced we have weapons for protection. She rolls her eyes. But they're being taught you should be protecting yourself against those people.
So Howard's saying, just 2 years older than what we were mentioning, you can get a hunting license when you're 14. So like then you do have to be learning this kind of stuff.
But you know what? I kind of feel like a hunting license is different than having a weapon. You can have a hunting license, but is it that you're using an adult's weapon to then shoot? Do you need your own as a kid?
I feel like parents would argue that they do, and you want to get used to what you're going to be using, and you want to teach them from an early age. I get that argument. But again, we're using it for a certain reason,
right? Under
supervision.
Yeah.
Like, you're right, because when you think about a 14-year-old, like, we know 14-year-olds, like...
Thank you.
Right. You want a parent available in there. And also, like, while I had exposure to this when I lived other places, I did not grow up like this. So, like, there is a shock value to me when it comes to this kind of stuff, and I think probably to a lot of us.
And Cindy, this is kind of interesting. I'm fully supportive of the Second Amendment, but lock them up and teach kids to respect guns. And maybe even if it is... that kids are getting these guns for hunting, which the hunting license is legal and valid, is it incumbent upon the parent then to lock those guns up?
Right.
And then give them to the child when they're hunting?
So I guess and my other question too, like Michelle is saying, we're talking about maybe it's slightly okay. Well, I guess my question is, what is the legal age to own a gun? That would be my question.
Wasn't it 18?
I don't know. What about a hunting rifle? I guess that's a good question, because then I'm in support of following the laws, to clarify. Do you know what I mean? So at what age can you own a hunting rifle in New York State?
So this is Wikipedia, and I don't really love citing Wikipedia.
We need somebody from the DEC here to answer these kind of questions, or like the hunting and gaming,
Okay, so 22 states, according to Everytown Research, which is a solid resource. 22 states have adopted a policy.
Okay, so everybody here is with us saying that you do have to be 18.
Right.
Okay, so then I would follow that rule. I wouldn't say then a 14-year-old could have their own gun. I would say yes, you need to follow the laws.
Right.
And is that for any gun? Because I just don't know.
It said rifle. Let me just pull this back up. So I'm just going to use Wikipedia as the reference here, and I absolutely hate doing this, but it is what it is. Adults 18 years or older can purchase long guns, rifles, and shotguns without a permit, and only adults 21 years and older can purchase or possess a handgun with the proper licenses. Minors who are at least 16 can possess long guns.
Okay, so now we're down to 16.
So I wonder if the possession is different than the purchase. And I think it is.
That's fair.
But does that then need to be raised to 18?
Okay, can I just tell you, if I do a quick Google search? Let me see. We are going to have to look this up for tomorrow. Because there are some we should bring somebody in to talk about this who actually knows, you know what I mean? Because I would love to have somebody, because AI, how they generate all this stuff for you now. It's giving me all this information. So I would love to have like the official answer here.
So Elizabeth says any guns in the house should be locked up. Absolutely. Sarah says at my high school we had a trap shooting club and there was a school advisor, but students didn't have parents there. But you had somebody like the school is in local parentis, right? Like they're in charge of you as the like your guardian while you're in their care. Lacey says, shouldn't these guns be locked up in a gun safe? Parents need to supervise children with guns while hunting. Otherwise, the kids shouldn't have access. And that's kind of my point.
Yeah.
Like, if a kid has a hunting weapon, like, it's not like this weapon should just be laying around.
No, absolutely not.
Like, it should be incumbent upon parents to lock it up and then, like, distribute the weapon.
And to also teach the kids how to properly lock it up.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like, everybody should be on board with, like, this is the safe way that we...
So Linda, kind of to my point, possession means you're holding the gun, where purchasing means you're buying, right? Obviously. Howard says, my son had his own gun since he got his license for hunting at age 14, but I was in control of it. So what does that mean, Howard, when you say that you were in control of it? Does that mean that you gave it to him when it was necessary to use or in with the intent to use it? Or did you take it back? Like, what do you mean you were in control of it?
Okay, so this is what the DEC for New York State says. Youths 12 and older may hunt big game with a bow. Youths 14 and older may hunt big game with a firearm when properly licensed and while accompanied and supervised by an experienced adult hunter. Where allowed by county, 12 and 13-year-olds may hunt deer with a firearm when properly licensed and while accompanied by an experienced hunter. So 12 and 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds, and this is with firearms. So it depends, and some is county dependent. But this is in New York State, DEC, New York State.
Howard answering my question here, it was locked and he only used it when the time was appropriate. And Naomi says, means he's being a parent. Elizabeth says, parents should be teaching their children to respect guns and respect life. Also, we were talking about hunting rifles, but these kids are shooting up schools with AR-15s, not hunting rifles. And that's fair too, right? Like,
right.
You know, there's obviously a difference in when you're a law-abiding citizen compared to a criminal. Obviously, we know, but I think we're talking in generalities as opposed to specifics here.
It's just interesting, again, because like this is not, I didn't grow up with all of this stuff, you know?
But when you're, a gun is a gun no matter what. And you've just got to treat it with respect and understand the consequences of using it incorrectly.
Yeah. And like, let's be real, people deer hunt for a reason. There's an overpopulation in New York State, like they have these rules and things for a reason. I learned a lot living in the North Country. I got to tell you.
Sure.
I tried elk the one time because someone hunted an elk and offered me some, and who am I to say? I'm like, okay.
Right. And there's nothing like venison, right? Like, I love deer.
Yeah, my friend's dad made some really good venison.
It's delicious.
And then my friend's husband, he went duck hunting, and they invited me over for dinner. And then he told me to chew slowly, just in case he didn't get all of the buck shot out.
Oh, God.
He's like, I just don't want you to crack a tooth. And I'm like, thanks.
That's so funny.
It's different in many places, but I think we all are on the same page when we say we're using them for what they're meant to be used for.
Let's talk about this one, because this kind of corresponds and correlates. When do you think adulthood actually begins? We say legally at 18.
This was so interesting to me. I read this morning and then I said it out loud to you. How old? Yes, we say legally at 18. How old do you think someone actually is to be an adult according to this survey? Like, when did people say, at this age, I feel like I'm an adult?
I actually thought this was kind of low.
You would? Oh my God.
Honestly, because I don't know. I mean, like, when I started here and I was this age, I felt like an adult, but I don't know that I was actually viewed as an adult.
Mark's with you. He was a little bit older, 30 years old.
That's what I was going to say.
The survey said 27, that people are like, I feel like an adult at 27. I was laughing because a couple years ago, my mom and I were talking about this, and I said something about somebody getting married young. My mom's like, they got married. They were like 28. And I was like, well, that's so young.
Okay, so Diamond was right on. She says 27. Diane says, I agree. Kids nowadays are not as mature.
Right.
Jeanette even going higher than I was. She says 34.
Right. Christine says it does depend on the individual. And I get that. Of course it does. There's going to be so many different circumstances.
Then she says 23 for women, 25 for men. Kenneth says 21. Honestly, so here's why they say this is how you know you're an adult. You've got financial independence. You prioritize your responsibilities over your personal life or fun. I don't know that I do that all the time.
Most of the time, yeah. Right.
moving out of your parents' house and landing your first job in your chosen field. So, frankly, that could have happened for me at 20, but I certainly was not an adult at that point.
Lori says, I know someone's 63, not a grown adult. Julie says, I'm not an adult yet. I'm sweet 60. Diamond. My husband's 31. He's not there yet.
Mark is right. Some adults never grow up. And you know some of those people, don't you? They're like Peter Pan.
I've known a Peter Pan or two in my day. Yes.
And some of them still exist.
Want to live in Never Never Land?
No.
Don't want to grow up? I won't grow up.
Anyway, we got to get the show on the road. Good conversation today, you guys, and we really appreciate you. No, we love hearing your voice.
Thanks for holding down the fort while I was gone.
Well, like I said, what
Thanks
Katie
to all
wants,
of-
Katie gets.
Thanks to all of you, too, because I know what he can be like when he's alone.
Have a great day.
Bye, guys.